we are going to be painting this birch tree sunset painting. There's also a little bit of a pathway in the middle, and if you've been watching this channel for a while, you know that I love sunsets. I love pathways, and I think birch trees are just really neat. So today I decided we'd do this cut-up lesson, we'd put it all together. This has been a Patreon lesson for probably a year now. So if you're interested in the digital sketch for the drawing process, you can check that out over on Patreon. You can get the full hour-long version, along with over 30 others up over on Patreon as well, and reference photos and all of that as well. So anyways, today's just kind of an amalgamation of a bunch of fun things painted together. I hope you enjoy. All of that said, let's jump into today's hour-long cut-up lesson thing. We're going to begin here, as we generally do, with our large square-headed brush. I'm going to dip it in water, but I'm only dipping the tip of the brush. I'm not getting the metal piece because that can hinder the binding. Then, I wipe off just a little bit so the brush is damp, not entirely wet. I'm going to grab a good amount of titanium white paint, as you can see here. I'm going to apply it over where I want my sun to be, in the sky. Now we can see through the paint because I did a lot of the drawing with a black Sharpie marker. And that's going to help us later because it means we won't have to redraw everything. Now I'm going to take some primary yellow, apply that to both sides of the white, and begin to blend out our sky. This is going to be incredibly vibrant here initially, and it's not what we want, but we're just building up a bit of a base. Getting lots of water on my brush yet again. Cleaning it off, grabbing more titanium white, applying that to the middle, and beginning to blend it out. We'll cover the entirety of the sky just to ensure that we don't have any pure yellow. We don't want it to be that saturated. Let it dry a little bit, not to the point where it's fully dry, but to the point where it's still just a little bit wet, and then we can add in our additional colors and have them be much more of what we want. Example, you can try it again right now. We still don't have a pure white, and that's good. We don't want a pure white, but we're getting something that's much more soft, much more akin to what I wanted. Now I'm going to switch over to my smaller round-headed brush. I'm going to ensure that it is damp. Going to grab a little bit of this primary red, some titanium white, mix up a bit of a pink, and apply this to our edges. I'm using the smaller round-headed brush just to kind of test it. It doesn't cover a lot of surface area, and it has a soft edge, so we're not going to get any hard strokes. It's a very subtle application there, and I end up liking it. So I'm going to clean this brush, put it down, grab this brush, because it can hold a lot more paint, remix more of that pink, rework it into our sky. Now, before I add in additional clouds, I do want that to dry, because again, if we were to just add to it, we'd make it a little bit more muddy and we wouldn't get the colors we really wanted. So in the meantime, I'm going to work on the reflection down here. I'm going to begin so with some titanium white, and we're going to kind of mirror the process that we used in the sky. And that's had some time to dry, so I'm going to take a little bit more red, a little bit more yellow, get something a little bit warmer, incorporate that into our clouds. Just build it up. You notice that it's more of an orange on the palette than it is on the painting. That's because it's blending on the painting. So it's important to remember that what you have on your palette probably won't actually be what you get on your painting. It'll be amalgamation, what's on the palette and what's already on the canvas. I'm going to switch over to my smaller square-headed brush. I'm going to grab a little bit of burnt umber, A little bit of primary yellow. It's going to mix to make a bit of a green. A little bit of red. Warm it back up, make it more into an orange. Good amount of white. And a tiny bit of black to desaturate it. This is going to be the color I'm going to attempt to use on our mountains back here. And that looks a little bit too bright to me. So what we're going to do, we're going to take some Mars black. We're going to take some burnt umber. Take a little bit of red. We'll try placing that at the base, because the base will be the darker area. Begin to blend it up a little bit. A lot of painting is trial and error. Don't be afraid to try things. If you don't like it, you can paint over it. It's not a big deal. Now it's closer, but it's still not what I want. So I'm going to get a little bit more black. A little bit of yellow. The yellow and the black will make a green, so we need to warm it up. We'll grab the red. Grab the burnt umber. We have something very dark now. But it'll mix with the lighter colors we have, so it might look just right. Now, we do need some of this in our reflection, in the water. So I'm going to do so with that same pigment, just in these horizontal strokes. Just like so. Then, I'm going to switch back to this larger square-headed brush. Grab some titanium white, a little bit of burnt umber, mix it with a bit of the pink. We have this darker pigment. I'm going to rework on the clouds a little bit. Make them a little more noticeable. We're not using a black, because when we mix it with the yellow, it'll turn into a green, whereas here we still keep a bit of a warmer tone. So that's how we're darkening it, with the burnt umber. And that is much more of what we wanted. But we couldn't apply this initially, because it would have blended too much. Now, I'm going to switch over to my older square-headed brush. We're going to begin working on some foliage here in the foreground. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to take colors that are similar because the light's going to be reflected down on this, and it's going to be a green. So we'll start with taking some yellow, get a little bit of black to turn it into a green, then we'll take some orange and see what we get. We have an orangey green here. Here we have a much darker green, which we can incorporate in the foreground. And when you initially apply paint, you can do it with a scraping motion, and then go back over it with a tapping motion to give it the texture. But as we get farther into the background, we need it to get much more subdued. So, we mix it more into that orange that we had. Now, that's our first layer, and we're definitely going to need to go back and do more additional layers because it's very thin. Acrylic paints are innately very thin, but before we do that, we need to let it dry. So, in the meantime, I'm going to work on this pathway. I'm going to do so with my medium-sized square-headed brush. I'm going to dip it in water, grab some burnt umber, and you know what, that's all we'll use to get started. We'll make this very simple. Now the edges of it should be a bit darker, so I'm going to draw in some Mars black, and then I'm going to blend the two with the litany of these horizontal strokes. Now I'm also going to use some titanium white and this orange for it in the background. And I'm doing this because the colors of the sky and everything else are reflecting down upon it. We should do that in the foreground a little bit too. But again, the foreground has more of the natural coloring. So we'll just blend up something akin to what we were using. We'll apply it more so in the middle. Get that nice pink, that nice orange. Create those little mounds of dirt. We'll need to brighten up a lot of that middle area, but we can do that in the near future. Till then, getting some more titanium white. Just warming everything up. Now, I kind of like to begin working on making that brighter again. So, we're going to grab our square-headed brush, some titanium white, and some primary yellow. Mix that into one of our oranger mixtures. I'll throw some highlight in the middle of this road. Again, it's a horizontal tapping effect with a little bit of a drag. As we get farther back, we'll do less and less because we want that to be more white, more desaturated. Now what we're going to do is to begin working on some of our trees. Going to do so with this same brush. Going to take some Mars Black. I can still see these through my painting because I drew them with the Sharpie. And I'm going to go back down into the ground area. Switching to the smaller, square-headed brush. Now we're getting into the real detailed work. So we'll take some titanium white, some yellow, a little bit of red, very small amount of red. We don't want a pink. We want more of an orange, orangey brown. Grab some burnt umber. That's a good color. Now, start applying this down here. You can make water. As you can see, we're just moving our brush in these horizontal lines. Just look like little puddles. Now I'm going to take that small square-headed brush, dip it in some water, grab some titanium white, a little bit of Mars Black, and a little bit of blue. And this is going to be the first color for the bark of our trees. I'm going to apply it to the edges in a tap, and then I'll drag a little bit of it back. And I'll continue to do so. This is building up the more middle tone. And if it's a little bit too blue, like that is, we get more black, we get more white, and then we'll go back into it. Now I'm going to switch over to the medium-sized square-headed brush. I'm going to dip it in some titanium white paint. Mix it over where we had our blue before. And we're using a larger brush, so we get something a little bit less defined, a little bit less sharp. I want it to be a little bit more natural looking. So I'm applying these highlights to the edge, dragging backwards. You can use your finger too, to kind of disrupt it. Here we're doing a lot of tapping at the top, trying to make it much more interesting. I'm going to begin here with the old square-headed brush. Going to ensure that the bristles are very much damaged, leafing off in different directions by just pulling back and applying some pressure. Then I'm going to grab some our Mars Black, some of our primary yellow, tiny bit of red, not much though. I want this to be a green, very dark green. Then I'm going to begin applying it right down here. I almost dipped my brush in the water, but if you remember, this is a brush you need to be very careful with when applying it in water, because the bristles do tend to condense, and we don't get all of this beautiful detail that we are right now. Switching over to the medium-sized square-headed brush, grabbing some white, a little bit of blue, a little bit of black, a little more blue. Build up the mid-tone for this branch, same way we did before. Tap and drag. Now I'm going to take the old square-headed brush, not dip it in water, almost did that again. We're going to get some of our yellow, a little bit of titanium white, a little bit of Mars black, something nice and bright there. Just kind of highlight a couple of the edges here. Now the tree here is going to be blocking the light, so we'll leave that area in shadow. And we'll also leave a couple of these other areas in shadow. Now we added shadows to these because it was very easy. It's very simple because of that, right? But we didn't do so with any of these. So let's show you how we can do that now, kind of in post. I'm going to take a smaller round-headed brush, or rather a medium-sized round-headed brush. I'm going to take a little bit of black, a little bit of burnt umber, maybe a little bit of yellow, a little bit of red, a little bit of everything. Get a lot of water on my brush. As you can see, it's just water on the palette right now. And we can work it in. We follow the line to here. We see that this is where the shadow begins. We follow the line. That's where the shadow begins. I want to throw in a couple of little flowers in here. So I'm going to take this smaller round-headed brush. Going to draw in a couple little petals. Now, it's time to add some foliage to these trees. I'm going to do so with my smaller square-headed brush. Going to mix up some red, a little bit of Mars black, a little bit of burnt umber. And I'm going to start over here. Just tapping in different foliage. So here, still using that small square-headed brush, we'll grab some red, some Mars black, and we'll even grab a little bit of blue to turn it into more of a nice dark purple for our background layers. We can add in more vibrant reds and highlights in the foreground. I'm now going to jump back into this with some primary red mixed with a little bit of the purple we had before. Here I'm taking some pink, purple, it has a touch of titanium white in it, and I'm highlighting areas of the trees that I think might have a little bit more brightness. Here, I'm going to mix up a real pink, beautiful highlight color, and we'll try to apply a little bit of that to these as well. Now we're going to work the final details into our painting. I'm going to begin with a very clean, small square-headed brush, as you can see here. I'm going to grab some Mars black. We're going to incorporate some knots in our birch trees. Some of them are going to be on the edge, some of them are going to be in the middle, but they're all essentially going to have a larger midsection, and then they'll taper off on the edges. Hey there, it's Ryan O'Rourke. I truly hope you enjoyed today's little extra video. It was essentially a cut-up version of one of the many hour-long lessons which we offer over on patreon.com. Over there you'll also find digital sketches of the 10-minute painting lessons, digital sketches of these hour-long painting lessons, and a bunch of reference photos as well. So if any of that interests you, or if you just want to support the channel, go over there and check it out. It is a pleasure pleasure to make these long form videos, and I love to share them with all of you. So thank you so much for watching. I will see you next Saturday with a new video, and above all, as always, stay creative.